Hello, greetings. This is Brother Yao. I hope you all are fine. I just wanted to thank you all for wishing me a happy solar return, happy birthday, a happy Earth Day, and a happy being born day. So thank you all. I appreciate all the best wishes. I had a very special day here in Ethiopia. So I'm going to describe that day. It may take a little while for me to describe that day, but it was a very special day for me. Basically, I spent 24 hours straight just up that whole day of my birthday, my Earth Day, my solar return day. It started approximately at 2 a.m. in the morning on September the 20th. And September the 20th here in Ethiopia is called Mescharam, Mescharam Zaten. So Mescharam is the month that takes place in the western month of September. In Ethiopia, it's called Mescharam. And Zaten is 9. So if I was born in Ethiopia, I would have been born on Mescharam Zaten or Mescharam 9. So that would be the day of my birth here in Ethiopia. Ethiopia uses a different naming system for their month and then also a different numbering system. So 9 is the day I would be born on in Ethiopia, which would be the 20th in the Western calendar. So then I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's when the internet is better here for me to access and do certain things I need to do. So on that day of my birth, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I just started doing some normal stuff for the nonprofit Pan-African Technical Association. So I was doing some bookkeeping and some accounting and that aspect. So then I noticed that it was getting light outside because as I'm talking to you right now, I'm sitting in front of the window, a nice big window, and it started getting light outside. So I wanted to see the sunrise. So I said, oh, let me just get up in the apartment that I'm staying in. It has a rooftop, and the rooftop is nice. You can go sit and watch the sunrise. And then it's been clear recently here in Ethiopia. So recently the sunrises haven't been that spectacular, but today would be a first clear morning that I can remember in the last couple of days. And I said, well, maybe we'll have a spectacular sunrise today. So I Googled and learned that the sun was going to rise here in Ethiopia at about 6:15 in the morning and in Addis Ababa. So it was about 5:30 that I noticed this and did the inquiry on the internet. So I decided to pack my items together, which is my bookkeeping items, my calculator, my notepad, and things like that. So I went up on the roof at 5:49 in the morning, and I started doing my bookkeeping and watching the sunrise. Started my bookkeeping and watching the sunrise, and then around 6:10, 6:11, the sun started to come up. And as I said, this is the rainy season in Ethiopia. So there weren't too many clouds on this particular day, my Earth Day. And the sunrise was very nice. Got a chance to see a very nice sunrise. I took photos of that, so I will post those photos on Facebook soon. And it was the ball of the sun as it was rising. It was fairly red, and it was nice. So that was the beginning, the second beginning of my Earth Day. The first beginning was 2 a.m. in the morning, and second beginning was the sunrise at 6:15 in the morning. So I stayed up on the roof, on the stairs, watching the sun, watching the birds fly by for about another hour or so to about 7:30, and that's when I finished my bookkeeping and came back to get ready to depart. We have an associate in Ohio who wanted some research done at the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, and there are some manuscripts there that we were looking at to send him. So my next appointment that day was to go to the Institute of Ethiopian Studies and to find and get photographs of those manuscripts. The manuscripts were interesting because there were some that were written in the Ethiopian language of Amharic, and there are others that were written in the Ethiopian language of Ge'ez. So most people speak Amharic, but Ge'ez is another language, and most people don't know how to write Ge'ez. And one of the differences, from my understanding of Amharic and Ge'ez, is that Ge'ez uses the same characters as Amharic does, but it's arranged in a different format. So let's just say, for example, Yao, and that would be Y-A-W in Amharic, but in Ge'ez, it may be A-W-Y. So the words and the characters that make up the words are arranged differently in Ge'ez. So that's why not too many people know how to speak it. So the manuscripts were in both of those languages, one in Amharic and two in Ge'ez. So the associate in the States wanted us to do some research to find those manuscripts, and we did. And the manuscripts are interesting because they are actually written on either sheepskin, goatskin, or cowskin. I'm not sure, but they're written on the skin, and that skin goes through a process and eventually is called parchment. And that skin is obviously cut and it's dried, and it's dried so that it's hard so that you can write on it. And then they write in red ink and black ink sometimes on the manuscripts or on the parchment. And then they bind it together, and they may tie it with a string, and then the front cover may be wood and the back cover may be wood also. So that's why these manuscripts are very interesting. And I like seeing that because it is history. And I'm not sure how old the manuscripts were that we were looking at, but one source of the manuscript, one manuscript that we saw, I think it was manuscript, no, it was the first manuscript, and it's called MS Rema, R-E-M-A, and it's from an area called Lake Tana in Ethiopia, and that's where one of the sources of the Nile, it's a big lake. The main part of the Nile flows into Lake Tana, and it accumulates there into a huge lake that has many islands on it, and then it flows out of Lake Tana to continue its course to Alexandria and to the Mediterranean Sea. And that's where one of these manuscripts was found. It was found in the monastery of Rimma, and eventually I will look and try to find the date of the manuscript. So the date of the manuscript could be any time. It could be 100 years old, it could be 1,000 years old, it could be 1,500 years old. But he wanted it for the content and not for the date. So I walked out of the apartment that morning to get the transportation to the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. So I'm standing on the main street, and this gentleman in this white truck, 2017, 2018 white Toyota, he calls out, "Mr. Yao, Mr. Yao." And I look, and he goes again, "Mr. Yao." And his name was Fitzum, and he's the son of a friend of mine in Los Angeles, a gentleman, Solomon, and he repaired many of my vehicles for a long time. So I got to know his family, I got to know his son here in Addis Ababa. So he picked me up that morning. So that was another special aspect about what happened on my Earth Day, is that someone noticed me, someone saw me, and they picked me up and they said, "Where are you going?" I go, "Oh, to the Institute of Ethiopian Studies." "Oh, I'm going in that direction too. I'm going near Piazza, and I can drop you off." I said, "Oh, great." So I was thinking that, wow, this has been a nice birthday so far, a nice Earth Day, where I was able to see the sunrise. So now someone picked me up and take me to near the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, and that we talked a lot in his truck, and he was getting ready to go to Bangkok, take his grandfather to Bangkok, and he was going to be there for about 2 weeks because they're just doing some medical checkups. Sometimes people go to different places here. There's a Korean hospital that's here. You have some Ethiopian hospitals that are here, and they're good hospitals. My person who I call my personal doctor, Dr. Letta, he works at the Landmark Hospital here in Ethiopia. Another friend of mine, Dr. Bizrat, he also works at the Landmark Hospital here in Ethiopia. So there's various ways that people take care of themselves, whether they do it here in Ethiopia or whether they go to India to get checkups, whether they go to the United States, whether they go to Bangkok or other countries. But the medical industry or medical facilities here, they're fine too. So he dropped me off, and then I went to a place called Arat Kilo. That means 4th kilometer, and that's a business section here. They have a lot of nice restaurants and things like that. So I was looking for Lomi, and Lomi is another name for, they call it lemon here, but it's more like a lime. And I use that for my hot tea. And for some reason, I usually buy it with folks from the street, the young men from the street, but there weren't really any of the street vendors, the young boys selling it. So then I got my shoes clean, because people here really clean their shoes, particularly in the rainy season. This is still the rainy season, so it's kind of muddy. So I had my sneakers on, my tennis shoes on, and I got them clean, not as clean as they could have been, but they got clean though. So I did that. And then I caught the taxi up to the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. I was able to get photographs of the manuscripts, and I will put some of those online too, so that you can see the writing of the manuscripts. And then there's a gentleman who wanted to help me do some of the research and some of the investigation. So I got a chance to see him in the library. He assisted me a little bit. So we have an appointment earlier in next week, maybe Monday or Tuesday. We have to go to the printing press. One of the printing presses here in Ethiopia started in 1924. And we're looking for a document now, a draft version of the Constitution in 1974, before Haile Selassie was overthrown. And that's a document that we're looking for. So in the libraries and institutes of Ethiopian studies, the manuscripts or books, they've been published. So either they are by an author, an editor, or a printing press. So since the draft Constitution was a draft, and it was developed by the Constitution Committee, maybe 1973, 1974, we're having a difficult time finding it. But our associate in Cleveland, that's what he's interested in. Next week, we'll probably go to the printing press, and then maybe we'll go to the National Archives and Library Administration. So after that research was done, I thank the researcher for helping me. His name is Malako. And then I went down to have some lunch. And the lunch was what we call bayanetu. And bayanetu is all kinds of vegetable food. And it was the cafeteria that's on the campus. The campus is Addis Ababa University, and it's a really nice campus. And I like the campus. It's green and trees and grass. So I had lunch there. And the lunch cost me maybe 85 cents. And that's another thing I love about Ethiopia. For us who come from the West, it's affordable. So 85 cents I had injera, and those of you who had Ethiopian food know about injera. And then on top of the injera, they put the wat, or the stew. So I had yellow peas, and then potatoes, which is called dinich, and also some shiro. Shiro is made from chickpeas. And then maybe I had another water stew, maybe some misr. But it was filling, and I enjoyed myself sitting outside near the gates of the university, and I just had some special time, some relaxed time, and enjoyed the food, had some buna and some coffee, and that was my lunch. And then I had to get directions to the place. I needed to get my hair done. I had to get my locks, not necessarily done, but tightened, because my locks had grown, and you see my locks here. So my locks, they were growing, and when they grow, they get little, hair could be a little bit weak, tighten them. So we go to, either my daughter used to tighten them, Saba, or other folks used to tighten my locks. So I had an appointment here to go get my locks tightened, let's say around 2 o'clock. And what I've learned here about Ethiopia, is good to get to places early. So I'm not saying that I got to that place early, but I was on my way, and I had plenty of time. I got into the taxi. Taxis here are minivans. So I got into the taxi, and I was on my way to the place, the salon, to get my hair done. I'm not used to the stop that the taxi needed to stop at. It was called Wello Suffer. And Wello is here in Ethiopia, that's, I think, in the north. And Relo Suffer, that was the area. And that area is kind of famous because the people in that area, Wello, they were having an issue, I think maybe an issue with their farming, or issue with water or something. So they came into the capital, Addis Ababa, I'm not sure which year, and they were at this sort of intersection where I was going to, and this was a number of years ago, could have been 50 years, could have been 100 years ago, and then they protested for support, and that's why the area is called Wello Suffer. And the taxi that was driving, you have to listen real closely because they make announcements. It's like the recorded announcements on the bus or the train, so they make announcements. Matemia Raraj, or Wello Suffer Raraj, or Bole Waraj, or Alam Raraj. So those are the names of the stops. So I wasn't really listening that closely, and the mate or the helper who collects the money announced that stop, and I didn't really hear. So the van has a choice: either go right and stay in the right-hand lanes and go to the stop, or go on the left and go basically underneath the stop. So the van went on the left underneath the stop because I didn't say anything. And then so I had to go to the next stop. I got off at the next stop, and I walked back to Wello Suffer. As I was walking back to Wello Suffer, I turned left onto the road that leads to the salon. And then I walked for about a couple minutes, and I saw a friend of mine, and his name was Mbakala, and he assists, and he does a lot with the nonprofit organization and volunteers and helps us to do our activities. And I just happened to run into him. So that was another special thing that happened today on my Earth Day, that I ran into a good friend of mine, Mbakala, and he was at the cafe sitting outside. And I stopped and talked with him, sat down, and he brought me a beer, had a nice beer. And then we talked about this project I was working on, trying to find the draft 1974 version of the Constitution prior to Haile Selassie being overthrown. Haile Selassie was deposed of in 1974, the day after New Year's. I learned this in the research. So New Year's here in Ethiopia is September the 11th. And so the regime that deposed of Haile Selassie, they didn't want to do it on New Year. They actually did it the next day, September 12th. And that's when they deposed Haile Selassie. So I learned that in the research of finding the constitution that the gentleman wants in Ohio. And then my friend Mbakala, he told me about why I was drinking my beer, he was drinking his coffee. He told me about there's this gentleman who used to work with Haile Selassie, and he's about 90 years old now, maybe even a little older than 90 years old. And he worked very closely with Haile Selassie. And he was interviewed on the radio recently, maybe a couple years ago, and then it was rebroadcast, a radio station here called Shega FM. So this gentleman, he was interviewed on Shega FM, and my associate, he heard the interview, and he said he knows a lot about Haile Selassie, and he could probably help you with the 1974 draft constitution. Another special aspect of my Earth Day. And I ran into people I needed to run into. I ran into people that I didn't know I was going to run into, but I was in the vibration and the vibration of my Earth Day. And when you're in a vibration, hopefully good things happen when you're in your vibration and others feel your vibration. And some people may call it consequence, but I call it just, walking in my vibration. So after I left him, I walked down to get my hair tightened, my locks tightened, and then some friends of mine and family, actually the family here, they actually made me a cake. So after I got my locks done, I was able to walk right near my apartment and right to my apartment. It's close. And then I let them know that I was done. So they brought the cake over. They didn't not only brought cake over here to the apartment, they brought something my favorite wat, or my favorite stew here. It's vegetarian, it's called azifa. So they brought me some azifa, injera, wat, and cake. And then a gift too, a nice little gift. Let me see if I can show you all the gift. So this is the gift that they brought me. So it's a shoulder bag. Some people may call it a man bag, but it's a shoulder bag. So they brought me this, and you see it has Africa on it, and that's one reason they got it for me, because they know I love Africa, and they love Africa too. So that was Sega and Mahalet, they're two sisters. They're part of my family here in Ethiopia, and cake, and we had a good time. So it's another special part about my birthday, Earth Day. And then I had a package that Ethiopian Airlines gave me a number of years ago. And it's an airplane, and I just waited to a special occasion to actually open it. And then one of the sisters, Sega, she opened it, and with the Ethiopian Airlines airplane. And I'll just get it and show it to you. It's up here. It's beautiful, and I'll fly it towards you, and you can see it flying. It's a beautiful airplane. And so this was what one of my colleagues at Ethiopian Airlines gave me. And it's a Boeing 787. And it's interesting because it says, I don't know if you can see it, Africa First. And that's the name of the airline. The airplane is called Africa First. So it's a symbology for a couple things, in my opinion. Africa First is that Ethiopian Airlines, I think, was the first airline in Africa to fly the 787. So that's one reason it's called Africa First. And I just look a little deeply into that and say that Africa was first one time in the world. The first for mankind. Mankind originated here in Africa, in Ethiopia, Kenya area, Ethiopia. And then Africa was first in civilization. Some of the ancient civilizations of Kemet or Egypt are here in Africa. and the pyramids and the monuments. So that was first off also. So Africa has a lot of firsts, and I always used to say Ethiopian had a lot of firsts also. So Africa first, and I thank my colleague and for giving me the aircraft. So that was another special aspect of the day, was the meal that my family brought me, and the gift and the cake. So, and they made the cake from scratch too. So no Betty Crocker cake, no box cake. It was made from scratch. And so flour, little sugar, little eggs, and whatever else they put into it. It was so that was really special. It was made from scratch, and they brought it over here to me. So that was another special aspect of my Earth Day. And then they left to go pick up their sister and brother from the airport, because their sister and brother was in Mombasa, and they went to Mombasa for a few days. And they came to pick them up at the airport, and another friend of mine said, "Hey, there's going to be some poetry today at the Caleb Hotel." And Caleb is a famous name here in Ethiopia. It was Emperor Caleb back in I don't want to quote it wrong, but I think it was in the 7th century, but I'm not that sure about that. So there was going to be some poetry at the Caleb Hotel. So there's this African American brother from LA, and he's been here for 13 years. So when I arrived there, he was doing his poetry, and then there's some Ethiopian sisters doing their poetry, and there were others, and the poetry was in Amharic a little bit, and then it also was in English too. So they did some poems in English and some poems in Amharic. So I was supposed to meet a friend of mine there. Her name was Haran, and she's the one that told me about it. And last year for my birthday, Earth Day, I can't remember where I was, but she sang a song for me on my Earth Day last year. And then this year she said, "Hey, we can go out on your Earth Day." So we went out to the poetry aspect, and she met me there, and I enjoyed that. We met some poets, and we talked with some poets, and maybe I'll put a little bit of that online a little bit later. But also, afterwards, we went to hear some traditional music, and that was the video that I posted. And that traditional music was at a place called Fandika. Yeah, Fandika. And I enjoyed myself listening to traditional music and saw the dancing. And then it was maybe about 1 o'clock. So I had an hour left for my 24-hour birthday. And I caught something similar to Uber. It's called Ride here in Ethiopia. So I called an Uber or Ride to come get me and take me back to the apartment. And right now they're having an issue with Ride and here in Ethiopia, because they have regular taxis and they're blue and white small taxis. And now they feel competition, and they feel that there's too much competition with Ride, and they don't like that, and they're losing money. So just like Uber, but Ride is a little bit different, because you can do it on the app and you can do it on the internet, but you can also call them. So we called them, and the guy said he was going to come get me. So he came, but the blue and white taxis wouldn't want to let him in front of the venue. So they, kicked the taxi, they hit the taxi, so he had to drive, and he left. And he called me back, and he kept calling me, and I was able to talk with him. And I said, "I'll meet you up the street at this restaurant called Romina." Romina was closed, but I knew where it was, and it was on the same street. So I walked up there, and there was a van on the side of the road, and there's security, just like there are police in the United States, there's security occasionally that are on the streets here. They were driving their truck. So yeah, I didn't want to bring my attention or attention of the security to me. So I crossed the street and walked on the other side, walked up to the restaurant where the Ride driver was supposed to be, and I called him, he called me, we talked, and he didn't see me, and finally I saw him. I'm like, "Oh, your lights are out, right? And you didn't have your headlights on." He goes, "Yeah." And I'm over here. He goes, I don't see you. I go, well, look behind you to the right and you will see me. And he finally saw me and I got into the car and he started taking me home. So I started talking to him. And the taxis here in Ethiopia and other parts, we sit in the front seat. If we're by ourselves, we don't sit in the back seat. We sit in the front seat with the driver. So we're talking and I found out his name and I think it was Shevet. And I have to verify that with friends of mine, but Shevet. And you ask people what do their names mean here in Ethiopia. So I asked them, what his name meant. And he told me the story about how his father named him. And this is on the way home to the apartment. And he says, do you know Bokolo? And I know Kolo, and I know Kolo is like a snack that you eat. It's like peanuts mixed with raisins or something like that. It could be trail mix, Kolo. And then Fundisha, I know that is popcorn, and I think Kolo is corn, but he said Bokolo. So he described Bokolo for me. It's like the corn that you get that's on the corn cob, but they roast it, and they roast it over an open fire, and they eat that when you're in the countryside, when you're in rural side here in the city. So you have people roasting Bokolo. And he said his father was in the countryside and his father had some Bokolo and he had some corn on the cob, roasted corn on the cob. And sometimes, corn on the cob just tastes like normal corn and you put butter on it, it tastes nice. And sometimes it may be dry. In Ghana, I get Bokolo and it's sometimes dry and it's hard and it's very chewy. And I haven't had Bokolo here in Ethiopia, but I think I'll get some Bokolo now since he told me the story. And the Bokolo that his father got at that time was kind of sweet Bokolo. It was a little bit moist, maybe it had a sweet state to it, but it was good. And his father liked it, Bokolo, and it was sweet. So that's what his father named his son, Sweet. So Shevet is like sweet and being a sweet young man and being a sweet person and being a good person. So that's how he told me he came up with his name, Bokolo. Shevet. And then the last thing on my birthday, on this very special day, this very special Earth Day, and walking in a vibration, and I told Shevet, the driver, that, today's my birthday. And Shevet goes, you know what? Today's my birthday too. And I'm like, no. And he goes, yeah. And he showed me his driver's license and it was his birthday also. So that is another special thing that happened today on my Earth Day. The last hour, that was about 1:37. It was almost 2 o'clock. The last person that I would see in the celebration of my Earth Day, my birthday, was a young man, and it was his birthday also. And that's how I learned my birthday was Meskerum Zaten, because he says, yeah, here in Ethiopia, it's Meskerum Zaten. And that is September 20th, and that's my birthday. So that was just special, meeting someone in this city of millions and millions of people, and this young man drives me home, and it's his birthday also. So very, very special birthday celebration here in Ethiopia. So the last thing I did was I wanted to celebrate the start of my 23rd hour going into my 24th hour up straight on my birthday at the place where I started it at. And that was on the roof of the apartment. So I went up on the roof of the apartment, I looked at the stars, I thought about this great, nice, special Earth Day that I had and said, Ethiopia. And this Africa too, not just Ethiopia. And it's in your mind too. And this is the thing that somebody said about Africa. Africa, the place is where your dreams can come true. So this is a place where I enjoy the family and friends I enjoy, and learning the language, Amharic, I enjoy. Amasaganalu, Meskerum Zaten. They ask me, do you speak the language? They go, Tanish, Amarinya, Italalo. That means a little bit I speak. I'm working at it. and they appreciate that too. So that was my Earth Day. I'm glad I was able to share that on video and got inspired to share that on video. And now it's about 5 a.m. in the morning, and the Muslim call to prayer is going on. So let me take you all to the window, and then you can hear there. I think you can hear that. And today is Sunday here in Ethiopia. It's the 22nd. And I think I may go for a walk, or I may just continue to do some more work. And then today there's some yoga that's going on. And I think I need to go to do a little exercise. And I think we'll do that. So this is Brother Yao, Ambassador Yao Davis, signing off. And thank you all for listening. And we will do this again sometime soon. Take care. Amasaganalu, as they say. Malcolm Ken, have a good day, Malcolm Ken. And then Ndamana Daru, how are you for a group? And then nighttime for you guys there in the States, whether you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. So then I would say Dana Daru, and Dana Daru is good night. So I hope you enjoy the video. And let me see if anybody has any questions. Let me put my glasses on. I see some comments from Sister Bell. And yeah, the universe does provide. I'm glad folks were able to hear. And Sarah, I'm glad to see that you have joy. And I think my cousin Ernest was on there, and George tunes in a lot. So I'm glad you're able to join too, George, and hope things are going well for you up in Seattle in your stress and structures department that I know you used to work in. Not sure if you still work in there, but this is great. So I'm happy I was able to use the internet to send our associate the manuscripts, and I guess maybe I'll post some of those right now so those who are up can see the manuscripts that I was looking at. Okay, everybody, hey, you take care, and we'll see you one day here in Ethiopia. Blessings, everyone, and the universe does provide.